VRMD nail hook. Go ahead, sign it. My wife smiled as her lawyer sat beside her. I did. The next morning her phone rang and his voice was shaking. Diana, I looked him up. Do you even know who this man is? This EO title. She brought a lawyer to make me sign. I did. She had no idea who she married. 97 characters. If this story hits you somewhere real, leave a like, share it, and subscribe. It helps more than you know. There are certain moments in a person's life when everything they've carefully kept hidden becomes unavoidable. Not because someone forced the issue, not because a door was kicked open, but because the other side of the table made a move they were never supposed to survive, and they did it with a smile. My name is Richard Holt. I'm 60 years old. For the past 37 years, I have tracked money for a living, not balanced it, not managed it, tracked it. I follow it through layers of shell companies and dormant trusts and offshore structures until I find the person holding the other end of the thread. I have testified before federal grand juries. I have handed prosecutors evidence that put corporate executives in prison. I have unwound financial frauds, mi parece sophisticated they took teams of CPAs years to construct, and I found the seam in weeks. The small businesses I keep on my official client roster, a dry cleaner on Buchanan Street, a tile contractor, a family-owned hardware store, those are real. I do their books. It's not a lie, exactly. It's just not the whole picture. My wife Diana always stopped at the first sentence. Bookkeeper, she called me at dinner parties, with that particular flatness people use for careers they consider beneath conversation. She never asked what kind. She never turned the page. I let her believe what she wanted, because the thing about truly understanding financial deception is that you learn to see it coming from a long way off. And for the past 14 months, I had been watching it approach. The afternoon they came to my office, I already knew what was in the folder. Diana walked in first, heels clicking across the hardwood I'd refinished myself 8 years ago during a long weekend she spent at a design conference in Scottsdale. That trip, I later confirmed, was also when she met the man who followed her through my door. He was somewhere around 42, wearing a suit that had cost more than some people's monthly rent, the kind of confident that is really just expensive clothes doing the work. He extended his hand before I could stand. Nathan Voss, he said, attorney at law. I shook it without expression and looked at Diana. She set a folder on my desk the way you set something down when you already know what the other person is going to do with it. I need you to sign these, Richard. What are they? Nathan settled into the chair across from my desk like he'd already measured it for furniture he intended to own. Standard documentation. Financial power of attorney. Just consolidates account access for cleaner household management. Nothing unusual. I opened the folder. Read slowly. Financial power of attorney. Full signing authority. Complete access to all joint and individually held accounts. Transfer rights included. I looked at Diana. She smiled, the particular smile she reserved for moments she thought she was winning. Because I love you. Because that's what married people do. They trust each other. Nathan tapped his pen against his knee. It's routine, Mr. Holt, unless trusting your wife is somehow a problem. I held his eyes for exactly 4 seconds. He looked down at his pen first. I picked up the pen, signed slowly and clearly, my name in full, across the signature line. Then I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. Tom, Diana's voice carried a note of surprise she hadn't bothered to conceal. You got what you came for, I said, and kept walking. Behind me I heard Nathan's low laugh, then Diana's. Told you he'd fold. The sound of crystal touching crystal. They were already celebrating. What they were celebrating was a document I had prepared myself. Same format as the real power of attorney. Very different terms. The original was already inside a sealed envelope in my desk drawer, right where it had been for 3 days. The version they walked out with was mine, every line of it. I left through the side entrance, crossed the parking lot to my truck, and drove north without looking back. The house in the rearview mirror, Diana's house, the one she had insisted on, the colonial with the wraparound porch and the mortgage she believed we shared, shrank until it disappeared. She thought she knew which assets were reachable. She had never asked the right questions. The sealed envelope on my passenger seat had been ready since Monday. I wasn't leaving, I was executing. I smoked my first cigarette in 9 months somewhere on Route 14 and thought about how long the game had actually been running and how completely Diana had misunderstood who was playing it. Diana's phone rang at 6:43 the following morning. I was in the guest room. I'd been sleeping there for 11 weeks, a fact she'd interpreted as emotional distance rather than strategy, and I heard it through the wall with the clarity that comes from being already awake and dressed, coffee in hand, watching the sky go from black to pale gray above the back fence. Her voice came through muffled, then louder. "Nathan, it's not even 7. What's happening?" I took a sip of coffee. "What do you mean you ran a background check? I told you that wasn't necessary." A pause, then her tone shifting into something harder, defensive. That particular register she reached for whenever someone questioned her version of events. "What are you talking about?" "He's a bookkeeper. He does taxes for small businesses. I've seen his clients." Silence. Long enough that I could picture Nathan on the other end, talking fast, probably standing up, probably pacing. "That's not possible. I've been married to this man for 7 years. He works from home, Nathan. I've met his clients." I set my mug down on the windowsill. The footsteps came down the hallway, quick, purposeful. I heard the handle of my office door. Then her voice again, quieter now, the performance starting to strain at its edges. "He's not here. His truck is gone." Another pause. Then, "Say that again." "He's a what?" "A forensic auditor." I walked to the kitchen, put my mug in the sink, and picked up my keys. "What is a forensic auditor, Nathan? Who does he work for?" Her voice was moving again. She was coming downstairs now, still on the phone, and I could hear the specific crack starting to form in it, the fracture line that appeared whenever things stopped going according to the plan she'd constructed in her head. "He investigates financial crimes? For who?" "Nathan, he balances books for a dry cleaner on Buchanan Street." I was standing in the kitchen doorway when she turned the corner. We looked at each other, whatever she'd expected to find, an empty house, an oblivious man she'd already outmaneuvered. It wasn't me, standing there with my jacket on and my keys in my hand and absolutely no surprise on my face. "Nathan," she said slowly, her eyes still on mine, "who did I marry?" I raised my coffee mug, still in my other hand, in a small, unhurried salute. Then I walked past her to the garage. "Richard! Richard, wait!" She was following me, close now, her voice picking up urgency. "Where are you going? What is he telling you that you can't tell me?" "Tom, stop." I opened the truck door. "Answer me. What's happening?" I rolled the window down 2 inches. "You wanted the accounts, Diana. Go look at them." "What does that mean?" "It means you should read everything before you sign it, particularly the section on fraudulent coercion." Her face went the kind of white that isn't dramatic, that's just absence. "What? You brought legal counsel into our home for the explicit purpose of pressuring me into signing a financial control document. In this state, that's called undue influence. The document you're holding is unenforceable, but mine," I shifted into reverse, "has already been filed." "Failed where?" "Richard, what did you do?" "What I've been doing for 37 years. Following the money. Yours, Nathan's, all of it." I backed out of the garage. In the mirror, I watched her standing in the driveway in her robe, phone hanging at her side, mouth open, the house rising behind her. The house she'd believed was already hers. My phone rang 40 seconds later. "Sophie, my oldest daughter. Dad, Mom is calling me. She's screaming about lawyers and frozen accounts. What's going on?" "I'll explain everything tonight," I said. "But sweetheart, Remember what I always told you about protecting what's yours? Don't show your hand until you know theirs. That's my girl. I merged onto the highway and left the mirror behind. You know those sponsored messages that pop up in the middle of things? This one matters. Check the description and the pinned comment for everything we recommend, from fitness to wellness to all the things that actually help you live better. The county recorder's office smelled like fluorescent light and decades of paper. I'd been here before, years earlier, when I was setting the structure that would become relevant today. My phone had rung 11 times since leaving the house, all Diana. I let everyone go to voicemail. Margaret Chen had been my contact at First National for 6 years. She slid a folder across the desk without preamble. The transfer completed at 9 this morning, she said. Mrs. Holt attempted to access the joint savings account at 10:40. Access denied. She called the branch 3 times. On the 3rd call, she told us she owned the property at Weatherstone Ridge and would be moving all her business elsewhere. What did you tell her? Margaret pulled the property summary. That the home at Weatherstone Ridge is held by a closed trust and has been since 2017. Her name does not appear on the title in any capacity. I nodded. The house had been purchased with cash 2 years before I met Diana. Proceeds from a consulting engagement in Denver that had run 18 months and paid very well. I placed it in trust the same week, and when Diana and I married, I let her believe we'd bought it together. She chose the kitchen tile. She argued with the landscaper about the roses. She referred to it as our house at every dinner party for 7 years. It had never been hers. She also accused you of fraud, Margaret continued. How'd that land? I explained the legal distinction between premarital assets and marital property. She hung up. My phone buzzed. Sophie again. Mom is calling everyone. She's saying you stole everything. Dad, what is happening? I typed back. Coming by tonight. Sit tight. Margaret pulled another file. The corporate card she's been using. She was an authorized user on your primary consulting account. I revoked access at 8 this morning. Do you want the summary? Last 12 months. She turned the page. $87,000. The pattern shows charges on Tuesdays and Thursdays primarily. High-end restaurants, hotel bookings, afternoon check-ins. I looked at the dates. They aligned precisely with the calendar entries in our shared account, which Diana had labeled, with a creativity I had to reluctantly admire. Pilates studio and afternoon reading group. She never covered her tracks, I said, not to Margaret, just to the room. Margaret closed the folder. What happens now, Mr. Holt? Now she realizes what she has access to, which is nothing she didn't bring into this marriage herself. I thought about something she'd said to me once, early on, in that first year when I'd chosen to believe a person could surprise you. I told her about my first wife, Caroline, who had died of cancer when Sophie was 9 years old. Diana had held my hand and said she understood loss. Understood starting over. I'd believed her. I'd wanted to. After Caroline, you want to believe in the possibility of something different, but I wasn't going to be taken apart by grief a second time. Not like that. I stood and thanked Margaret. Outside, the afternoon sun was sitting low and clean above the parking structure. One more stop. The storage unit on the industrial side of town, the one Diana had never known about, where I'd been transferring copies of everything for the past 14 months. Bank statements, hotel check-in records, text logs. Evidence isn't protection until it's somewhere the other side can't reach. I wasn't trying to destroy her. I was making sure she couldn't destroy me first. Sophie's apartment had high windows and exposed brick and the particular energy of a person who had built exactly the life she intended. She'd gone into investment analysis, sharp like her mother Caroline had been, careful with money in a way that made me proud every time I thought about it. She'd earned everything in that apartment herself. Her younger sister Claire was already there when I arrived. Corporate law. She'd flown in from Chicago that morning, and the laptop open on the coffee table told me she'd been working the whole flight. Dad, Sophie poured coffee. Mom called 7 times. She's telling people you've locked her out of her own life. I protected what's mine. She tried to take it. Claire turned her screen toward me. I pulled the power of attorney. If it had been valid, if she'd filed the version she thought she had, She could have emptied every account you hold, joint and individual. It wasn't valid. No, because of the coercion clause you embedded 7 years ago. Claire looked at me with an expression that I recognized as professional respect. The moment she brought an attorney into the home for the express purpose of pressuring you to sign, the document voided itself by its own terms. Sophisticated, Sophie said. I've had a long career. Nathan Voss. Sophie pulled up a browser tab. We looked him up this afternoon. He's more than her lawyer. I know. I've been tracking his financial relationship with your stepmother for 8 months. How long have you known? Claire asked. Since spring of last year. She was using our home network for calls she didn't want traced. Not a smart choice, given that I monitor our network security as a professional baseline. Sophie's jaw tightened. Mi pareja, she was cheating and trying to steal from you simultaneously. That appears to be the sequence, yes. We can push for criminal charges, Claire said. Fraud, conspiracy, the coercion documentation alone is... I held up a hand. I'm not interested in prison. I'm interested in walking away from this marriage with everything that was mine going into it, and with documentation that makes any legal counterattack by her impossible to sustain. Claire pulled another screen. The trust structure is clean. Premarital purchase, properly filed. Her name nowhere on the chain of title. She has no claim on the property. What about her business? Sophie asked. I've been watching her interior design accounts for 11 months, I said. The cash flowing through that business doesn't match any legitimate client billing I can identify. I filed a detailed report with the IRS 6 weeks ago. Both daughters looked at me. She's going to tell people you're the villain in this, Sophie said finally. She already is. She'll say you're controlling, abusive, that you stole from her. Let her say it. The documentation says something else, and documentation doesn't have a motive. Claire closed her laptop. What do you need from us? I needed you to hear it from me before you heard it from her. She'll work every relationship she has. She'll paint whatever picture serves her. You needed the actual picture. Sophie nodded slowly. We know, Dad. Your mother, Caroline, told me something the year before she died. She said if I ever loved someone again, make sure I understood who they actually were before I handed them the ability to hurt me. I paused. I tried. I kept one eye open. It was enough. The room was quiet for a moment. What happens to her from here? Claire asked. She has no house, no account access, no corporate card. Her business is under federal audit. She'll try to negotiate, then threaten, then leave. And Nathan Voss. I allowed myself a small, considered smile. I submitted a formal ethics complaint to the State Bar Association last week. Having a romantic relationship with a client while providing legal counsel in a matter directly involving the client's financial interests, that's a significant violation. His license is currently under review. Claire laughed, short and genuine. You're not destroying them. You're just documenting everything and letting the institutions do their job. Exactly. We talked for another hour. I laid out everything, the trust filings, the bank records, the hotel documentation, the recordings. When I left, the sun had just dropped behind the buildings across the street and the street lights were coming on in sequence down the block. Sophie walked me to the elevator. Dad, are you okay? Not legally, actually okay. I hugged her. She felt like Caroline around the shoulders. I'm relieved, I said. Living alongside someone you can't trust is a particular kind of exhaustion. It requires constant performance. Now I don't have to perform anything. She held on for an extra second. Mom would be proud of how you handled this. I hope, mi pareja. I drove home through the lit-up streets. The house was dark when I got there. Diana had gone somewhere, a hotel probably, burning through whatever credit she had left while she tried to find a lawyer willing to take her case without a retainer she couldn't produce. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. My house, still mine. I poured a drink in the study and sat with the quiet. Tomorrow would bring more noise, more calls, more threats. But tonight, The quiet was complete. The IRS does not announce itself with phone calls or casual emails. It announces itself with certified letters and the weight of federal authority. And when Diana's letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, she called me within 20 minutes of signing for it. "What did you do?" Her voice had crossed from anger into something more brittle. "They're auditing me." 7 years, Richard. 7 years of records. I was at a coffee shop reviewing materials for an actual client, a regional logistics company that suspected an internal embezzlement scheme. I didn't look up from my notes. I didn't do anything, Diana. I provided information to a federal agency about financial activity I had reason to believe was irregular. That's a legal obligation in my field. What information? Your business accounts, the deposits that don't correspond to any invoices. The client payments from entities I can't verify exist. The expense categories that look less like operating costs and more like money cycling through a clean-looking vehicle. Silence. Then, quieter. "You're trying to put me in prison. I'm protecting myself from someone who attempted to defraud me. If your books are clean, the audit will reflect that. Are your books clean?" She hung up. 3 days later, Nathan Voss called me directly. First time we'd spoken since the afternoon in my office. His voice had lost its boardroom confidence. There was a tightness to it now, the sound of a man recalibrating his entire situation. "Mr. Holt, I think a conversation between us is overdue." "I don't agree, but go ahead." "The bar complaint. The investigation is active. They're pulling records. If this proceeds the way it looks like it's going to proceed, my license, I know how it looks. You're going to end my career over this. The Bar Association is reviewing whether you violated professional conduct standards. I didn't write those standards. I just provided the evidence of what happened." His voice tightened further. "I never advised her to defraud you. You helped draft a financial power of attorney explicitly designed to give her complete control of assets she had no legal claim to. You were simultaneously in a personal relationship with her. Those two facts together constitute a textbook ethics violation. The hotel records I submitted cover 26 visits over 8 months. The bar has all of them." A longer silence. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to stop contacting Diana. I want you to remove yourself from any involvement in her legal situation. I want you to disappear from this story. She has nothing, Holt. No money, no home, nothing. You've left her with nothing. She came into this marriage with her own assets. Those are intact and available to her. Everything she tried to take from me was never hers. She's desperate. Desperate people make choices. She made hers." Another pause. Then, quietly, "Watch yourself." I recognized it for what it was, not a sophisticated threat, a frightened man's last attempt at leverage. "I'm recording this call," I said. "I'll be filing a police report tonight." He hung up. I called Claire immediately. She had the report filed before dinner. That night I had a security company install additional cameras, upgraded motion sensors, and a monitored alarm system. Not paranoia, preparation. There was a difference, and I understood it precisely. 10 days later, someone smashed my windshield at 3 in the morning. The new cameras captured a figure in dark clothing, face partially obscured, moving with the body language of someone who knows they're being filmed but doesn't care anymore. I gave the footage to the detective assigned to the vandalism report. He watched it twice. "You have some idea who this might be. My wife and I are in the middle of a separation. It's become complicated." "How complicated?" "IRS audit, Bar Association review, frozen accounts, that level." He nodded with the specific patience of someone who has heard this category of story many times. "We'll follow up. Stay vigilant in the meantime." "Already am." I had the windshield replaced that afternoon and sent the invoice to Diana's attorney, the one she'd managed to retain on credit she was burning through faster than she could generate it. She was unraveling at a consistent pace, and I was documenting every stage. "Don't forget, Everything we recommend across fitness, health, and all the stuff that actually makes a difference in your daily life is in the description and the pinned comment. Worth a look. Marcus Holt, no relation, just an irony I noted, sat across from me at a diner on the south side of town. 27 years old, Army logistics officer, still carrying himself like someone who learned early that posture was non-negotiable. He had Diana's cheekbones and absolutely none of her artifice. I'd reached out to him through his sister, and he'd called me back within the hour. I appreciate you making the time, I said. I appreciate you being willing to see me at all. He stirred his coffee. He'd been doing that since he sat down, not out of restlessness, but out of the particular deliberateness of someone choosing their words carefully. I heard what she tried to do to you. It sounds familiar. His sister was on a video call. She hadn't been able to fly in, but she'd been clear that she wanted to be present. Her name was Brooke. She waved from a small, tidy office somewhere on the West Coast. Hi, Richard. Thank you for including me in this. Of course. You both deserve to hear what's been happening. Marcus leaned forward. Our mother stole from us. That's the cleanest way I know to say it. Our father, her first husband, left a trust for our education, $200,000. She was the trustee. By the time I tried to access it for graduate school, it was gone. She told us there were fees, Brooke said from the screen, administrative costs from settling the estate. She produced documents. They were forged, Marcus said. We didn't know that for another 2 years. How did you find out? An old friend of my father's, someone who'd helped set up the original trust, ran into Marcus and asked how school was going. Brooke said, when Marcus told him there was no money, the man looked like he'd swallowed something wrong. He walked us through what the trust should have contained. Then we hired someone to trace it. She'd moved it through 4 different accounts over 18 months, Marcus said. Every dollar, gone. Spent on home renovations, international travel, things she decided she deserved. I slid a folder across the table. I want to show you what I gave the IRS. Marcus scanned the pages, his jaw set. These deposits, these are too large for legitimate design consulting by an order of magnitude. That's the IRS's current position as well. Is she going to prison? Brooke asked. Not emotionally, practically. The preliminary audit findings suggest significant charges. Tax evasion at this scale carries 5 to 10 years. Combined with the fraud documentation from my case, the picture isn't favorable for her. Good, Brooke said. Flat, final, without guilt. She's never faced a consequence for anything she's done, not once. We talked for another hour. They told me things I'd suspected and things I hadn't. The patterns of behavior that stretched back decades. The way she played victim the moment accountability approached. The relationships she'd burned mi pareja thoroughly that neither of them had spoken to her in 4 years. She'll tell everyone you're the abusive one, Marcus warned. She's probably already started. I have documentation. Evidence has no narrative. It just exists. Marcus shook my hand as we were leaving. His grip was firm, deliberate. If you need us to testify, we'll be there. In court, on the record, whatever it takes. She tried to do to you what she did to us. That ends now. Driving home, I thought about what it costs a person to leave destruction behind them everywhere they go. Not the damage done to others, but the price the destruction extracts from the person doing it. Diana had spent decades taking from people who trusted her. Her children, her brother, me, every person who'd believed in her version of herself. This time, the accounting was going to be accurate. The man who walked into my office 2 weeks later introduced himself before I could ask. Warren Calloway, Diana's brother. I studied him. Mid-50s, work-worn hands, direct eyes, nothing polished about him. The opposite of his sister in almost every way. She told me you two hadn't spoken in over a decade, I said. 15 years. He sat without ceremony. That's why I'm here. When someone's done something long enough that the people closest to them stop speaking to them, the story is usually worth understanding. He set a folder on the desk. I came because you're fighting her, and because she needs to be stopped by someone who actually has the tools to do it. I looked at the folder, didn't open it yet. Our parents died in 2009, he said. Left us equal shares, house, savings, investments. About 400,000 total. Diana was the executor. She was always the educated one, the one who understood finances. I was a mechanic who'd just lost both parents in the same year. I trusted her. She took your half. She took all of it. He said it without heat. Just the particular exhaustion of someone who'd held that sentence for 15 years. She showed me documents, estate taxes, legal fees, complications she said had eaten through everything. I was grieving. I didn't know enough to question it. When did you find out the truth? 3 years later, family friend who'd helped my parents write the will ran into me at a funeral, asked how I'd used my inheritance. When I told him there was nothing left, he went quiet, asked me to let him look into it. He paused. It took 6 months. She'd moved everything into accounts only she could access. Forged the expense documentation. Every dollar. Did you pursue it legally? Tried. Statute of limitations had run. Civil suit would have cost more than I'd recover. He slid the folder across to me. I cut contact. Told her if she ever approached me again, I'd make sure everyone in our hometown knew exactly what she was. I opened the folder. 15 pages. Bank records showing the transfers, side-by-side comparisons of the forged expense documents and what the actual estate records showed. Witness statements from the family friend and 2 others. This is evidence of criminal fraud, I said. I know. Do what you need to do with it. The statute is gone on my case, but a pattern is a pattern. A jury sees this alongside what she tried to do to you. It changes the picture. Why now? You don't know me. He looked at me levelly, because she's been doing this her entire life, and no one has ever been in a position to hold her fully accountable. You're in that position. It might as well be now. After he left, I sat with the folder for a long time. Then I called my attorney. That evening I showed Sophie everything Warren had brought. She read it in silence. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with something that wasn't quite crying, but wasn't far from it. Dad, she's been doing this since before you ever met her. She's a predator. A careful, patient one. What are you going to do? Make sure this is the last time. The assistant district attorney's office was gray walls and fluorescent light and the residual smell of coffee that had been burnt and remade too many times to trace. James Ellison sat across from me with the folder open between us. Warren's documents, my recordings, the bank records, the hotel logs, the IRS preliminary findings. He read for a while before speaking. Mr. Holt, you've been building this systematically. It's what I do professionally. He turned a page. The brothers' evidence. On its own, the statute prevents prosecution. But as a pattern, establishing that she's done this before, deliberately, against people who trusted her, that's significant for sentencing and for the jury's understanding of intent. Can you use it? Absolutely. The IRS preliminary findings are more immediately actionable. Unreported income, fraudulent expense reporting, cash deposits totaling over $300,000 in 4 years with no corresponding legitimate source, tax evasion at this scale. We're looking at 5 to 10 years on those charges alone, potentially more with the fraud counts from your case. The power of attorney attempted fraud, clearly documented. The coercion recording is admissible. Single-party consent jurisdiction. Your documentation is thorough, Mr. Holt. I'll be honest with you. I don't usually see civilian evidentiary packages this complete. 37 years of practice. He closed the folder. I'll be taking this to a grand jury within the next 6 weeks. If they indict, and given what's here, I believe they will, your wife faces multiple felony counts across 2 separate categories of crime. I left that office feeling nothing dramatic, not satisfaction, not victory, just the particular stillness that comes when a long calculation reaches its final line. That night, Diana called. First time in 2 weeks. I heard you went to the DA. Her voice was quieter than it had been in months. The performative anger was gone. What remained was something rawer. Tom, please, you have to stop this. I could go to prison. You could. I'm begging you. Tell them you won't cooperate. Tell them you made a mistake. I didn't make a mistake. I'll lose everything. You've already lost everything, Diana. The question now is what the legal system decides to add to that. Please. A long pause. I was scared. I was stupid. I made terrible choices. But I don't deserve prison. I thought about Warren sitting in my office with 15 years of quiet anger and a folder full of forged documents. I thought about Marcus trying to pay for graduate school and finding nothing. I thought about Brooke's flat, final good when I told her the audit was serious. I thought about all the people who had sat exactly where I was sitting, trusting Diana's version of herself, and paid for it. Cassie, Diana. The name slip was the closest thing I felt to emotion. You've spent your life taking from people who trusted you. Your brother, your children, me. Every time you faced a consequence, someone let you walk away from it. Maybe it's time to face one that actually holds. I hate you, I know, but you hate consequences more. She hung up. Sophie called 4 minutes later. Was that Mom? Yes. Are you okay? I'm fine. You're not going to stop cooperating with the DA. No. Good. A pause. Claire and I talked. We want to be at the trial. Whatever form it takes. We want to be there. You don't have to. We want to. You protected yourself, and you did it right, and you didn't do anything wrong. We're proud of you. Another pause, shorter. Mom raised us, but you taught us. After we hung up, I walked through the house, my house, still standing, still mine. Poured a drink in the study, and sat with the quiet again. In 6 weeks, a grand jury would see what I'd built. The case was solid, the documentation was complete. I slept better that night than I had in 14 months. The courthouse steps were cold on a November Tuesday, the kind of cold that comes in clean and flat off the open sky. Sophie and Claire stood beside me. Good coats, steady expressions, the kind of presence that doesn't need to announce itself. Ready, Dad? I've been ready since March. Inside, the courtroom had the particular atmosphere of places where things are decided. Old wood and controlled air, and the specific quiet of an audience that knows the weight of what it's about to witness. Diana sat at the defense table with a public defender. She'd burned through 2 private attorneys already. Neither had lasted more than a few weeks when it became clear the evidence was structural, not circumstantial. She looked different. The careful, polished presentation I'd watched her maintain for 7 years had come apart at the edges, natural roots showing through the salon color, a blazer that was practical rather than designed. The woman who had walked into my office with a folder and a hired lawyer and absolute certainty about what was going to happen had been replaced by someone I almost didn't recognize. Almost. The judge entered. We stood. Case number 2024 CR 9112. The State versus Diana Calloway Holt. Are parties prepared to proceed? Diana's public defender rose. Your Honor, my client wishes to enter a plea at this time. Diana stood. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from performance, from the particular strain of a person who has finally run out of narrative. Guilty, Your Honor, to all counts. The prosecution stood. Your Honor, in light of the defendant's plea and the evidentiary record, the state recommends 38 months in federal custody, followed by 5 years supervised probation and full financial restitution to all documented victims. The judge looked at Diana steadily. Miss Calloway, you understand what you're pleading guilty to? 4 counts of tax evasion, 2 counts of fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud. You understand this plea carries a custodial sentence? Yes, Your Honor. And you enter this plea voluntarily, without coercion or promise of leniency beyond what's been stated? Yes. Sentencing is set for December 19th. The defendant is remanded to custody effective immediately. 2 marshals approached the defense table. Diana turned once before they reached her. Not toward her attorney, toward me. It wasn't anger in her face. It wasn't even hatred. It was something I hadn't expected, something that looked from a distance like the first honest thing I'd seen from her in 7 years. Defeat. They led her out. The courtroom began to clear. In the corridor, Sophie found me first. She hugged me without speaking for a moment. "It's done," she said. "It's done." Claire joined us. 38 months, maybe 30 with good conduct. "Still long enough," I said. Outside, Marcus and Brooke were waiting on the steps. She'd flown in after all. They'd both wanted to see it. Marcus shook my hand. Brooke smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't have anything to apologize for. "Thank you for seeing it through," Marcus said. "You made it possible, both of you." Brooke looked out at the parking lot. "Maybe now we can actually start moving forward." Warren called that afternoon. I was sitting in my truck in the courthouse lot, not ready to drive yet. I heard she pled guilty. 38 months. That's right. A long pause on his end. Good. Maybe she'll learn something in there. Another pause. "Tom, thank you. I couldn't do what you did. I didn't have the tools. You did." After he hung up, I drove home through the Tuesday afternoon traffic. The city going about its ordinary business all around me, completely indifferent to what had just been decided inside that courtroom, which was how it should be. The house was quiet when I got there. The divorce papers were already filed, uncontested now that there was nothing left for Diana to contest. Nathan Voss had had his license permanently revoked and relocated to another state. Every thread tied. Sophie and Claire came for dinner. We cooked together, the way we'd cooked when they were young, everyone with a different task, talking across the noise of the kitchen. We laughed about things that had nothing to do with courts or documents or forensic audits. We talked about Caroline, the way we always did when the three of us were in the same room. Not with grief anymore, just with the particular warmth of someone who mattered and still does. "She'd be proud," Claire said. Not tentatively, as a statement. "Of how you handled it," Sophie added. "I hope mi pareja." I poured the wine. She told me something, near the end. She said the way you protect yourself isn't by building walls, it's by keeping your eyes open and your documentation complete. Sophie laughed. She did not say that. She said something like it. We ate together until the evening went dark outside the windows. When they left, I stood in the study for a while, looking at nothing in particular. My house, quiet, mine. 18 months later, I was standing in the same room, watching spring rain move across the garden through the back window, and the house felt different in a way I hadn't been able to anticipate. Lighter, like something had been exhaled that I'd been holding without realizing it. Sophie had gotten engaged. The man was good. Careful with people, unpretentious, the kind of steady that doesn't need to announce itself. I'd run a background check. Old habits and worth keeping. Claire had made partner at her firm. Caroline would have cried, in the specific way she cried at good news, quickly, matter-of-factly, and then moving on. Diana was 16 months into her sentence at a minimum security facility in the eastern part of the state. She'd written me twice. Both letters came back unopened, returned to sender, no indication of forwarding address. Marcus and I had dinner occasionally. He was applying to doctoral programs in international logistics. The money Diana had taken would never be recovered, but he'd built around the loss with a stubbornness I recognized and respected. Brooke had started her own firm. They were both in the careful, deliberate way of people who've had to choose it consciously, okay? Warren called every month or two. We'd become something I hadn't expected. Actual friends, the kind built from surviving the same specific thing from different angles. My work continued. New clients, new cases, companies in different industries all encountering the same fundamental problem. Someone somewhere is following money that isn't theirs, and the only way to stop them is to follow it better. I was more selective than I used to be. Life had become, in the way that you hope it becomes, too full of things that mattered to spend unlimited time on things that didn't. The doorbell rang. Sophie and her fiancé, bringing food from the place on the corner they decided was the best place on earth. We ate at the kitchen table with the rain coming down outside, talking about wedding venues and whether the garden would work and what Caroline's opinion would have been about the floral arrangements. After they left, I walked through the house, room by room, the way I sometimes did. The study, the kitchen, the front hallway I'd repaired myself more than once over the years. Every room held something, not Diana's presence, which had faded cleanly and without drama, but the presence of the life that had been here before her and was still here after. In the study, I opened the locked drawer. The documentation, all of it, still there. The bank records, the hotel logs, the recordings, the forged estate documents Warren had brought me, the IRS correspondence, the bar association filings, everything. I stood looking at it for a moment. Then I carried it outside to the fire pit, one page at a time. Hotel receipts, bank statements, the forensic audit reports I'd filed with the IRS, Warren's documents, the bar association complaint, all of it, feeding steadily into the small fire I'd built. The last thing in the pile was the power of attorney Diana and Nathan had brought to my office that afternoon. The fake one they'd walked out with. The document that had started the visible part of all of this. I'd kept it, marked, as evidence. It had been marked into the trial record. It didn't need to be in my drawer anymore. I held it for a moment in the firelight, reading my own signature at the bottom. The signature I'd written deliberately and clearly, knowing exactly what I was doing, knowing what it meant and what it didn't. Then I let it go. It caught at the corner first, then the whole page. I watched it burn down to nothing. I thought about what it means to prepare, not to live in fear of what might happen, but to simply see clearly enough that when something does happen, you're not surprised by it. I'd done that. I'd protected what was mine, stopped someone who had been causing harm for decades, and done it without losing myself in the process. I was Tom Holt, 62 years old, father of 2 women who had built their own lives and were proud of theirs. Grandfather, probably, if the hints Sophie had started dropping meant what they sounded like they meant. A man who had loved his first wife completely and mourned her honestly and tried again with his eyes open. The fire died down to orange coals. I went inside, washed my hands, and called Sophie. "Hey, sweetheart, about the wedding venue. I've been thinking about the garden." "Dad, seriously? Your mother, Caroline, she planted those roses herself. Every one of them. I think she'd want to be part of it." A pause on her end. When she spoke, her voice was the specific kind of quiet that means something matters. "That's perfect, Dad. That's exactly perfect." After we hung up, I sat on the back deck in the spring rain, not bothering with an umbrella. The garden was coming up green. Somewhere Diana was counting days in a facility she hadn't chosen. Here I was watching rain fall on roses my first wife had planted, thinking about a wedding in the summer, thinking about nothing in particular. Free, completely, finally free. Not because I'd beaten someone. Not because I'd won something, just because I was here, in my own house, in my own quiet, with nothing left to defend and nothing left to perform. That's the only victory that ever actually lasts.